Hello and welcome to day 2 of the Storied Way. Yesterday I began a story, and those of you who came in yesterday would remember that there was a boy who wanted to be an apprentice. He didn't even know what an apprentice means, but he saw this traveler who would visit his village, his town, with amazing things to tell people, and he wanted to just be like him. And after a brief exchange, this traveler said that this is going to be a long journey, a journey of discovery, a journey where we will walk across strange paths with curious things to see and amazing things to feel and imagine. Are you ready? And that boy had said, yes, I am. In the middle of the night, this traveler and his newfound follower took off on the road, a mysterious path. They walked and walked and walked through the night. The traveler in front and his apprentice, his supposed student, walking 2 steps behind in his shadow. At times, he looked up at the traveler walking in front, hoping that he's going to turn back and see whether he's really following him. But he didn't. It was as if he was on his own journey. The traveler coughed a bit. And the boy said, is there something I can help you? Can I do something for you, master? The traveler looked and said, I am not a master. We are travelers on a journey, and you are my new co-traveler. But master, we agreed that you will teach me everything that you have to teach. And I am here to learn about all the amazing things that you do, the magic that you do with people. I said, well, magic that I do with people, I have also learned it from other travelers like me. And I can only share all that I do. And you have to just observe, watch, listen, and learn if you can. The boy said, I have questions. Can I ask? I said, well, I hope I have an answer for that. Oh, why don't you ask me that question? Boy said, tell me, how do you know what to say to every person you meet? I have seen you do wonders with people who have known you, people who you have known, people who have not known you, the small, the old, the young, the unknown, the faceless. You have something to say to everyone, no matter what they ask you. How do you know what to tell them? How do you know how to make them feel good? How to calm them? How to give them a smile? How do you know all of this? The traveler said, well, you have to find out what do they need. You see, all of us, we have some wants and we have some needs. We fight for our wants. We will go to the rooftop and we will scream and shout about our wants. But sometimes we ignore the needs. And it's when you listen very carefully, will you know what your listener needs. The young apprentice is all confused. Needs? What do I need? I don't know. What does anyone else need? What do people need? The traveler said, well, everybody needs someone to just listen to them. You see, everybody wants to communicate with someone, want their lives to mean something for another person. That's the basic need, to be loved, to be cared, to be understood, to matter. If you understand what is that specific need of your listener, you will have a bond. You will create a bond. On that note, time to transition to day 2 of the Storied Way. Tonight, we are talking about needs, and needs of a very special audience that we have met from time to time. I request everyone to just mute themselves because it's easier for us to concentrate. I know you must be preparing for dinner or there could be other emergencies at home. So just mute yourself. I'll take a minute to mute. All right. Tonight, We have two wonderful moderators from YSB tribe of storytellers, which is Charlie Wasan and Shivani Pandit. They will take the conversation ahead, and I will sit in the background watching and listening to both of them. Over to you, ladies.
Thank you, Rituparna. What a lovely story. Wonderful, wonderful way to, set in the topic. Hi everybody. I am Charlie Wasan. A warm welcome to you all to this very special evening. We are celebrating World Storytelling Day, and this year the theme is Lost and Found. From telling stories to my child, to being an edupreneur, using stories in my work with children with special needs. I have been discovering every day how stories work wonders, and sometimes, in fact, usually silently and mostly in the most invisible ways. Isn't it, Shwetal?
Yes, that's the magic of stories, right? Good evening, everybody. Hi, this is Shivani Pandit. I'm a brand storyteller and an inclusive author for children's books. And in my journey, I found that, whenever I need not find stories, I think stories find us and they help us define and redefine ourselves every time. So as we hop on with the apprentice looking for things on this trail, I invite you to discover precious nuggets of insight, inspiration, and stories on the Storied Way. This is our day 2, as Rituparna said, and today we have our pitch stop where we meet 3 amazing special educators and story practitioners with us to spotlight on the hidden, lost, and often forgotten stories, the special stories for special children.
Let me introduce you to our 3 speakers on today's Special Stories for Special Children panel. Champa Saha is a book lover, storyteller, actor, and theatre director, special needs educator, a passionate disability rights and inclusion advocate, and has spent the last 4 decades working towards impacting the life of marginalized children. Nancy Leppard is a special educator, versatile storyteller, performing for people from all walks of life, from mainstream classrooms, special needs children, teachers, to taxi drivers, and on various platforms, classrooms to museums, malls, and MRT trains. She mentors aspiring storytellers for special needs under the aegis of Feast Singapore. Shivani Pandit is a special educator with an expertise in the area of ASD, that is Autism Spectrum Disorder. She is the founder, director of Samarthya Foundation USA, passionately working on the early identification of children with disabilities, high quality interventions, intensive parent training sessions for parents of children with ID, intellectual disability, and autism spectrum disorder, and professional development opportunities for teachers working with young children with autism in India. Her inclusive children's books initiative called Nanny Publications is aimed at changing young children's understanding and attitudes towards their peers with disabilities.
A very warm welcome. Good evening, you awesome ladies. And it's such a pleasure and honor to have you here. I also want to thank all of you here who are joining us live on your webcams and stuff. It is wonderful to see you here. And while we keep our conversation going, we would really look forward to your thoughts, your questions on the chat box, and we will definitely take them up towards the end of the session. Now, you might ask, who are special children and why storytelling for special needs children? To put that in context, I'd just like to add that, in India, approximately 1.7% children are diagnosed with a special need. And we know that this is just the tip, because there are many children who are not diagnosed, who are hidden in our classrooms. And special needs category as such is a very broad category. We are covering challenges coming from physical, sensorial, developmental, emotional challenges. And the challenges only multiply because there is a lack of awareness, lack of training, resources, services, and most of all, acceptance. I think acceptance is our biggest barrier. It is our only disability. So there are many questions, I'm sure, in your minds. In the audience today, we have special educators, we have parents, and we also have storytellers who would like to pursue storytelling for special needs children professionally. So at the outset, I think we would like to take note of the fact that intervention, which is specialized, is very different from general education. And here, I think this panel discussion with these experts will be an excellent opportunity for you, if you are a special educator looking to add storytelling in your toolkit while you plan interventions for your students with special needs. It is for you if you are a storyteller who would like to understand diverse needs of your audience, like to sensitize yourself so as to chisel your skill, your craft, to tell impactful stories. This is also for you if you're a parent and would like to, carry storytelling at home. And this is definitely for those who are story lovers, story seekers, who would like to know what kind of stories to look for their children, for children specifically with special needs. Now, special needs, like I said, is a broad spectrum, and needs for children are also universal. Some are universal in reality, but there are also some specific needs, right? Now, I'm glad that there are so many questions today because when I started my journey as a parent, there weren't many questions asked because simply there was no awareness about what are the needs of a special needs, of a child with special needs, right? So I want to jump in straight with the first question, and I want to address it to you, Champaji. And the question is, what are special needs, right? And how does storytelling address these special needs? Now, another part of this question is, can storytelling be employed for children with challenges and across ages? And why I'm asking you this question is that oftentimes the one question that plays on an educator's mind or a parent's mind is, why use stories with children? Will they even understand you? So over to you, Champa.
Thank you. Very interesting topic after my heart, like I've spent a lifetime. So yes, I would like to start off by emphasizing that all of us, whether we are storytellers or teachers or special educators, whatever we are, we need to completely internally think of our audience as children. They're all children. And then we have big children, small children, children who speak English or understand English, children who don't, children from private schools, public schools, children with a leg missing or a drooling, children who cannot sit up, children who cannot make sense of the world. There are millions of these permutation combinations of children. So if we have made up our minds that we want to tell stories to children, then the buck stops there. We need to understand why we want to tell stories to children. That is a broad topic. That is for all children. And there is nothing specific about whether a child with a special need, as you just very aptly pointed out just now, a special need is not one special need. Even in one child, let's say a child has an evaluation of mental retardation, of intellectual disability. what does that connote for us as a storyteller? Probably that what we need to understand, that there is going to be a discrepancy between our expectation of that child's understanding of the story that we are going to tell them vis-a-vis age parity. So I have a 20-something, is a young man. So if I'm going to tell stories at a pub where there are 20-somethings, 30-somethings, with their beer mugs, and I'm going to tell them a raunchy story that's full of innuendos, that's full of, sexual overtones and jokes, I'm not going to do that. If I am with an audience of 20-something, 30-somethings, who I know have an evaluation of mental retardation, because now I'm going to tell stories which are probably going to be of interest to 13, 14-year-olds, maybe even 7, 8-year-olds. That's the only difference. So it's just like being a teacher in a classroom and being able to choose your subject and topic and the level and the vocabulary which you're going to use to convey your subject. Now, having said that, there is a lot of discussion on the sensitivity of content. My experience with children with multiple areas of neurodiversity and other kinds of diversity has convinced me that children are not really bothered so much. We are programmed to think that they are bothered because, again, as you very rightly pointed out, there is a major section of the world that is cruel to difference. It need not be disability. You can just be a dark child in a white household, in a fair-skinned household. You can be a child who's been adopted from a different part of the country. I've worked a lot with mentoring adoptive parents, and we've had very enlightening and enriching dialogues with parents on should Care India actually bring in something like regional preferences, because when I have to work with a child who's 13, 14 on his or her emotional and psychological difficulties, because he or she is trying very, very hard to come to terms with her very white skin or very dark skin in a family that is completely the other way. And although everything has been done categorically, the disclosures have been done very beautifully. Parents are loving, supporting, all of that. But we presume things on behalf of children. So if we are telling a story that, that's about football to a bunch of children who are on the wheelchair, are we to presume that they're going to be hurt or disturbed? We can't presume. What we can do is we can respect our audience and we can ask them. They are very comfortable with their disabilities. We call it disability. That for the child, it's the norm. I can guarantee, I can totally guarantee you an autistic child thinks that we have lost it. Why do we talk so much? Why is there so much color all around? Why do we ask somebody? I have a highly intellectually functioning autistic young man who tells me, tell me, Champa, every time somebody meets me, they ask me, hi, how are you? Do they really want to know? And I tell him, no, sweetheart, they don't really want to know. Then what is wrong with you people? He asks me. He calls me, you people. So what has happened is, this whole thing of inclusion is a misnomer. Who has excluded whom? The paradox is those who have excluded a particular section are the ones who have now taken up the mantle of including them. So the inclusion is now being done again on parameters of exclusion. Inclusive schools, huge websites, this, that, blah. You go. We can only cater to children with LD. Sorry. If your kid is autistic, please get a shadow teacher. We are very inclusive. We have a separate building for special needs children. Excuse me. We are inclusive. We have a separate building. Doesn't work. So storytellers remain storytellers. Respect your audience. Doesn't matter what it is. Ask them. I've come today with a bag full of stories. There are stories in my bag that are about heroes, that are about this, that are about that. And I do see members in my audience who have trouble seeing with their eyes, or, you know, what would it be? Would you like to hear a story about somebody who could see very well and do things? Would it be okay with you? Your children say, yeah, ma'am, it's okay. Go ahead and tell the story. Don't presume injury, insult on behalf of your audience. It is an intelligent, thinking audience to be respected. They may be 2-year-olds, they may be 10-year-olds, they may be anything. It's an audience to be respected. No presumptions. So what we need to be maybe a little careful about is how we portray the triumph of the good over evil. The triumph of overcoming difficulties. Stories tend to be stories. We do not want our children to be given false hopes. I tell my children, it's a story, my darling. And I also do sessions on real stories. You know, the children who get awards on 26th January, it is such a challenge for me. I don't get any information on them. I rack, whatever little time I have, but I always have, when I go for fests or stuff like that, I always have one of that session, because I tell the children, this was a real child, like you sitting out here, a real child who got burnt and saved another sister, a real child who died and did this. So just for like any other child, a storyteller must enter the magic world of stories. After preparing the children, it is a magic world of stories. Things happen in stories that may or may not happen, but let's see what we can take from the story. There are so many things. There are people, there are colors, there are smells, there are places, there are experiences. Let's go into this together. But it's a story. That is the respect for your audience, and you must have it.
Yes. So,
Lovely, Champa.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
you want to go ahead, Charlie? You can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't agree with you more on this. Like, even I hate the word inclusion. I mean, who gave you the right in the first place to exclude? And then, you're claiming now. And also, I can't agree with you more on, that we don't need any special intellectual level to understand stories. There's nothing to understand. And in fact, I read about a research conducted in Romania with adults with severe severe intellectual disability. And I'm emphasizing the word severe because that's a question that comes up in the minds of many special educators, that all right, everything is fine, but with severe and profound cases, how will the stories work? What will they understand? What will they make out of it? And just imagine these researchers, the research clearly showed the positive impacts of storytelling on their communication, language, behaviors, everything.
If I may just add to that, a storyteller is exactly what these two words say. He or she is a teller of stories. There must not be any agendas. It's a story I'm telling to an audience. Why am I bothered about who understands how much of what I'm telling? Do I understand the story that I'm telling? Have I ever asked myself that? Because I presume that I understand. I presume because I'm an adult, I'm educated, I read well, I write well, so I understand. I'm sorry, no, I don't. I have no clue what the writer really wanted to convey. These writers are long gone. Some of them are not even there. I mean, they are not written stories. They are just told. So how do I presume? So a storyteller is just that. You tell your story, you put your heart and soul into telling the story. But if you have people in the audience who don't want masks, who are, okay, don't use them. Just tell your story. That's who you are. Don't hijack the story. You are the teller. You are not the story.
Beautiful.
A successful storyteller is one who gets forgotten by the audience, but the story is remembered. If you are a storyteller who gets compliments, my God, you were fantastic, I come back home very dejected. And I tell my son, I have failed. Today I have failed. I don't know why they remembered me. And then he says, Ma, how do you know they didn't remember your story? I said, well, I mean, I do hope they did, but they should not have remembered me. So that is what.
How awesome.
That's really a very, very deep, very profound statement. And I think that really means a lot for a storyteller to unshackle those learnings and unlearning and all of that. But having said that, I mean, if a general teacher is looking at addressing the needs of the child in the classroom, I'm sure there is a focus, if you're employing storytelling as a tool, right? Or as a pedagogical tool, for example. So how are, like you said, I mean, gathering from what you said, this would be applicable to children with special needs as well, right? And like we were talking about inclusion right now, and I think stories, right? Stories find us, and it's the story that is more important, ultimately. But I still want to come back to the idea of inclusion, however we may, sort of disagree, because for want of a better word, I think somewhere inclusion is something that we are sort of paying attention to now, right? And in that context, coming back to the story part, I want to know what are these stories that we should be telling children. Now, I go back to some of the questions that I was asked when, as an inclusive author, I wrote my first few books in collaboration with Shivani and Samarthya Foundation. And I had a senior educator come to me and said, oh, why are you writing these inclusive stories? How are they going to help a special needs child? So I clearly felt that there was a disconnect in understanding between a story, an inclusive story, and all of that. So I want to take this question to Shivani as a publisher, who's solely focusing on publishing these inclusive books, right? To start with. And I want to know from you, what are these books really? What are these inclusive books in the first place? And who are these for? Yeah.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
Shivani, yeah.
Thank you so much, Shwetal. And I want to thank your story bag, Rituparna, and Charlene, Charlie and Shwetal so much for, welcoming me on this platform. It's so lovely to be here with Champa and Nancy and all this tribe of wonderful storytellers. To be very honest, it's an honor for me to be here because I think storytellers have this unique power. Like rightly what Champa said, telling of a story is a huge responsibility, and it's that power to to influence, I feel. So I'm very honored, honestly, to be here. So to answer your question, Shwetal, about the inclusive books, so the way I took up through the foundation work, through Samarthya Foundation, what I decided to do was to use storybooks as a tool to create awareness. So it's not exactly storytelling, but looking at a children's book and figuring out how we can use that as a tool to generate conversations between neurotypical children about diverse abilities, about their peers who may have a different ability. Because I feel the word inclusion, like Champa said, is a big word, but I do think that it is of need. It's our responsibility to make this an inclusive world, right, for all of us as citizens of this world. And I don't believe inclusion can happen without a conversation. I don't think we can change a thing unless we talk about that thing, whatever that thing may be. So bringing to light just normalizing conversations, where conversations are about a child's strength and challenges. So looking at both those aspects at the same time. And I want to read out to answer your question about who these books are. They are for all children, neurotypical, not neurotypical, disability, no label, label, all children. But the idea is that I want to read out this quote by Rudine Sims Bishop, who said this wonderful thing about books. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but books are sometimes windows offering views of world that may be real or imagined, okay, familiar or strange. These windows are also, they can also be sliding glass doors. And readers have the ability to walk through into that imagination to become a part of whatever world the author has created. And finally, when lighting conditions are just right, a window can also be a mirror. I love that quotation. So books are mirrors, windows, and sliding doors. Now, why is that important? And the reason I say this is why inclusive books that have been created by Samarthya are important to me, is that it can serve as a mirror for a child who has a disability. So they see themselves in a story. It's very, very important for ourselves to see ourselves in some stories sometimes. It's that representation. It's a sense of belonging. Oh, there I am in that children's book. They could be windows for neurotypical children, where they're just looking at a different world that they may not be part of. So understanding, exposure to new, it's not just about disabilities. It could be culture, diversity, language, food habits. It could be anything that they are not familiar with, right? And it's to create that. I think windows through books create that sense of non-judgment. If you know, we all have read books, and when we read about something that's new, it creates a sense of non-judgment in us. And finally, it serves as a sliding glass door. So a sliding glass door where we can help children walk into a story, reflect on a child who is different. If I'm a neurotypical 8-year-old, maybe I read a story and I can reflect and think about what's different about that child, but in a normalizing way, in a strength-based manner. Maybe it can help me change my perspective about how I think about a wheelchair. What do I think about a wheelchair? Well, typically we either in books, I have noticed that, or in general in our conversation in society, either we go into extremes, either we pity a condition or we glorify a condition. We're never in the middle. Children with disabilities are just that. They're children first, and the disability is with them. So we have to talk about the child first, but instead, we can tend to talk about the disability so much and put them, pitify them, if that's a word. I know that's not a word, but I'm just going to use it. So we are either pitifying them, or on the other extreme, we may glorify them and say they are just gifted. When some children may be gifted, but not all, it's not necessarily true. So let's see where can we use children's story books as a tool to create this conversation within our neurotypical larger community about having strength-based conversations. So that's sort of the focus with which I started publishing children's books. And all our children's books are really designed for very young children, 5 to 10-year-olds. They're illustrated, colorful, fun. They're books first. And the story is important, but the story is a very simple story. The difference is that each book has a child who has a particular kind of a disability. So we are bringing visibility without pitifying the child or glorifying the child. We're just saying, here's a kid, he has dyslexia. Well, these are his challenges. And through the course of a day with his friends, he does something fun. He does something not extraordinary, but something fun. That's the messaging that I'm trying to utilize or give out through these books in order to, again, like I said, have conversations, because I don't think that we have enough conversations. And so we tend to then put children with disabilities in either bucket, because the conversations that need to happen in the center are not happening. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. So, yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, lovely, Shivani. In fact, now moving on to Nancy, I would like to know from you also, Nancy, the same, is storytelling any different for a special needs child? Why? Because, or maybe, if it's possible for you, you could share some examples. For example, the one where you shared with us, during our mentorship, there was a child who used to use his one hand more. I don't know, something or the other. Please.
Yeah, well, since I'm a storyteller, so I think the best is to tell you a story, right?
Wow.
And
Super.
but this is a true story, because when I first started out teaching in a special school, I had no idea about storytelling. I was not a storyteller. I went in, I was attached to 2 teachers, and I was learning from them because I was fresh out of school myself. So I was in a class with 5 children. And I remember them very clearly today. And I think, Charlie, this is the one you're talking about, where she kept touching her nose on and on. She just kept touching her nose until there was like a little bruise here. And she wasn't disruptive to the rest of the class, but she just did that the entire day. And then I had a boy who would grind his teeth really loud, quack, quack, quack the whole day. And then there were a pair of twins who were running around, and they were, doing all these actions. Then, so that's 4 of them. And then one girl, she was echolalic. So she would repeat choice things, and often it was the wrong thing to repeat. And, once she said it, then you realize, oh, did I say that? So I grew up listening to stories. My dad told me stories about himself, and my mom told me stories from her religion. And I listened to the stories on the radio and from television, I think. And I only knew stories like Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Three Little Pigs, the usual Grimm's and Aesop fables. So one day, when I was in class with the kids, and I think my 2 senior teachers were taken out for a reason and leaving me there with the 5 of them, and it was time for break, and we were with them the entire day. And I was thinking it was rather quiet, and the twins were running around, the girl was touching her nose, and Ryan was grinding his teeth, and the girl was saying things. And I thought, why don't I tell them a story, because it's very, very quiet. So I think I must have started with Cinderella. And as I went on, there's this girl, and of course I told it properly, and she lived with her stepmother and her, and she was very sad because the girl who was touching her nose, she just stopped, and her hand went down, and she smiled. She didn't look at me, but she smiled, and I knew she was listening. And then I realized as well that Ryan had stopped grinding his teeth. And the 2 boys who were walking around, they had sat down wherever they were, and they were listening to me. And the girl with echolalic, she was listening. And when I finished the entire story, she didn't repeat anything. So I had a very quiet class. Everyone was listening, but it was break time. So they were now eating. And when my 2 senior teachers came in, they were like, what's happened? This is not normal. And I told them, I said, well, I started telling a story, and somewhere during the story, this is what happened. So they were amazed, and I was amazed. And I tried it every day, and every day it worked. I was really pleased about it. Now, did the story have anything to do with what they were learning that day, or no? There was no agenda, right? It was just a story because I grew up listening to stories, and I thought, why not? Then maybe slowly I added things in, like if the topic was about fruits, and then I told the story about Little Red Riding Hood. So I said, okay, she brought an apple, she brought a pear, she brought an orange, and it was all in her basket, and she went to her grandmother's house. And during the journey, she opened up to check, is the pear there, is the apple there, is the orange there? So there was a lot of repetition, and the kids enjoyed listening to that. So that was in a special school setting. Now I left the special school setting after 7 or 8 years, and I went into a mainstream school where normal kids. And I went to a boys' school, so they were all boys, and I was teaching grade 1 because the principal said, you have come from a special school, so you will be able to handle 30 boys who are running around. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, I went into the class. It was already July, which is half the year. And sad to say, not much discipline. They did not want to learn. They were running around. And one day I thought to myself, this cannot go on. I'm very tired. Oh, and I must tell you that after I left the special school, for some reason, I forgot about storytelling. I went into the new school after new training with all this, things to do and how to teach, and forgot about storytelling until one day I decided I need to calm them down. So I started telling a story, and the boys sat down and they listened. And when the story ended, there was this silence. And then they said, can you tell us another one? So I did, because I was enjoying this silence so much and this attention. And I did. And then when it finished, they said, another one? And yeah, it was amazing, 30 pairs of eyes. And I thought, okay, this is my opportunity. I've not been able really to give them a good lesson. So I said, okay, I will tell you another story, but first, let's learn this, whatever we were doing in mathematics. And I finished it and they learned it. And then I said, okay, we have 5 minutes before the lesson ends, which otherwise, once they finish learning something, they would be up and about. Who wants the story? And 30 hands went up. So this went on every day. I started with a story. And then when they said another one, I said, let's do our work. And then I ended with a story. And the interesting thing is that soon I was getting emails from the parents to thank me, because they said that previously, when their sons went home and they asked, what did you do for English? What did you do for math? What did you do for, Now, instead of them having to ask, they would go home and say, hey, mom, listen to this story. And they had stories to tell. And for the parents, it was just important that the kids were having something to talk to them about. So special school, normal school, they all love stories, right? I agree with what Champa was saying. Yeah, just tell, it's the story. So yeah, I'm here today also. I was so glad to be invited by Rituparna and Shali, because I advocate storytelling. And if you are nervous about telling a story and what do I do and will they like it, don't worry. You learn a story, something that you know, and you tell it. You tell it with your heart, your soul. You love what you're doing. You embrace the children, love them, and they will feel it coming from you. Like when we speak and we are so passionate about what we're speaking about, all of you know that yeah, it's coming from our heart. So
Awesome.
What a story.
Awesome.
You know what, when Nancy and of course when Shivani was saying the things, what struck me was that what we see in children when they run around, or when there's echolalia, there's all those things that we don't understand or we try to manage or control, is the outward manifestation of certain behavioral characteristics. Primarily, it is communication. It is the child communicating with us, and a story communicates. It functions on the two very basic foundations: telling and listening. The listening and speaking are the first two fundamental skills of language learning, language teaching. Is L and S. R and W come much later, the reading and the writing. And that's what the story does. So as Nancy said, and I have goosebumps all over me, because I think all of us storytellers at some point of time have seen this. We've had children running around, and even a child might have continued to run around. But if you're on the lookout for it, you will see signs of the child is listening, because all children, especially children with deficiencies, disabilities, handicaps, the receptive language levels are far, 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 far higher than the expressive language levels. And we make the stupidest mistake of judging or deciding what my child understands based only on their expressed language levels. No, It is the receptive language level that is important. So as Nancy said, she told a Cinderella story, and I mean, whether or not they can relate, understand, doesn't matter. It conveyed something. Here was an adult talking to them. Here was an adult relating to them, communicating with them, solely with them, focused. That's what the storyteller's magic is, through the story. Doesn't matter what the story is. Actually doesn't matter.
Can I just add to this? Am I out of turn to just add to what Champa said?
Go ahead.
So she just reminded me of an example of, the power of what Nancy was talking about, and what Champa was just saying about the receptive language and the listening, and the assumption that a lot of times, and I'm definitely talking to the parents in the audience here, to assume the level of the child, based on what that book might be. Of course, you want to match up a little bit, but not to assume whether the child will understand or enjoy the book or not. So I do a lot of online trainings, parent trainings for, mothers who have children with autism or other intellectual disabilities. And one of the sessions that I usually do is use of books and storytelling as a tool for learning and stimulation of learning and language and environment in the home. And one of the moms, after this session was done, I gave them some tips and strategies of how to do book reading, storytelling. And after a couple of weeks, this mother messaged me saying, there was a light bulb that went off in my brain. And I was like, how so? What happened? And she said, ma'am, I had never imagined that my child, who's 6 at the time, who was diagnosed with autism, would have anything to do with books. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And she said, after your session, I started implementing reading books to her during the day. And I had told her to, give her a choice between the 2 books and let her choose. Don't assume that she's going to want to read the book that you want to read. Just give her 2 choices and let her choose, and keep books around the bedside, at night, and create a bedtime storytelling routine, which was a brand new idea for this mother. And of course, she was so diligent. She went ahead and did everything. In 2 weeks, she said, the daughter, who's 6-year-old, who had never turned a page in a book, because she was never given the opportunity, not because she couldn't do it, right? Because the assumption was, and I'll tell you more about what this mother said, which really gave me goosebumps, that after 2 weeks, the daughter was bringing stacks of books. She was completely nonverbal. And she was bringing stacks of books to the mom at around 9:30 at night. The bedtime routine, she got it, and she would just stand there. And the mom called me and said, ma'am, I don't know how this happened. And I said, it's always been there, right? And she said that I was told that my daughter has autism, so she won't understand books. So she said, ma'am, I'm a book lover. I used to read a lot of books, and I stopped reading the minute my child got this diagnosis. And now she's gotten back. She said, ma'am, if I can say this in Hindi, and I'll translate this for you, Nancy. She said, बिस्तर के साइड की सारी चीजें हटा के किताबें रख दी. She said, I moved everything off of my side table from the bed, her makeup stuff or whatever was there, and she just put a stack of books for her daughter. That is the power of a book. And that is the power of that storyteller that mother became. And I don't know what stories she was reading. I don't know what books she was reading. That's not important. The idea is the learning that can happen for all children. Nancy was talking about children in a mainstream school. Champa was talking about children with special needs. The learning is there. That's the power of a book. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah.
And going back to Shwetal's point about the pedagogy or the teaching learning, a story for a child is not threatening.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else in the curriculum book, so to speak, when they go to school, is a threat. They have to learn, they have to understand, they have to remember, they have to reproduce. So intelligent teachers can use stories to bridge these gaps, to create connections with their children. There was this 6-7-year-old long back who had this thing about the word problems in math. He knew addition, he knew subtraction, but would never do the word problems. Until I got to know, I don't know how I got to know it, because I was always the English HOD. This was a math thing, but whatever, it came to me. So I went to observe the class, had a chat with the kid, played football in the break. And I said, those are just stories. It's a story about a boy getting so many pencils. The other one gets so many pencils. It's just a story, sweetheart. Nothing else. Done. So, yeah. So, then we had this workshop where I was told by the principal, do this workshop with math teachers. And I said, I can't count 2 + 2. What math workshop do you want me to do? No. It is about language. I said, yeah, that I can do. So it can be stories. Addition can be stories. Division can be stories. History can be stories. Geography can be stories. The plant growing can be a story. Germination can be a story. You tell the child, what I'm going to do today is going to tell you the story of what Napoleon did in that damn war, man. It's a story. And the kids will be far more open to, history, boring, but it's a story. Somewhere you'll reach at least a few more and you break down these psychological barriers that unfortunately the formal schooling systems globally have created in tender minds. They are so scared because it's so performance oriented. All the time we are watching them like hawks. Which spelling have you not learned? Which full stop have you not put? Why have you not written it there? What is this careless mistake? Ladies and gentlemen, no child ever makes a careless mistake. Careless mistake is an oxymoron. It doesn't happen. A child makes a mistake. Well, let's investigate it. Let the child investigate it. And it's a story. There's a story behind every mistake. There's a story to all our days. We get up in the morning and the day's story starts. Sometimes you're putting the tap on and there's a trickle and then it's off and there's nobody at home and you are stuck in that washroom like without your dressing gown. There's no water. You have soap all over yourself. Such a fantastic story to start your day. Happens to all of us. So children all teachers can make use of the concept, the principle of a story. All teachers can be storytellers in the classroom. Whether they're teaching something like really, really grave and serious, like whatever, gravity. But gravity is about the apple falling on his damn head. So it's a funny story. Everything can be a story. So with special needs children, relating is a challenge. They live in a world, children with autism, children with ID many a times. You did speak of severe and profound. It's a different world altogether. And what we want to do in the best of interest is bring them into our world. We are transgressing on their rights. That should not be the attempt. We could tell them that I would like to be a part of your world. I would like you to be a part of my world. But I need to understand which part of my world is completely unacceptable to you. Help me to understand that. I have a small program of homeschooling for a bunch of it's a menagerie. It's like a real bunch of clowns that I have. And one of my children is autistic, nonverbal. And recently we just completed 1 year of whatever. And there were some certificates I handed out. They were thrilled. They've never been given certificates by anyone, from anyone. They were thrilled. A certificate means it's an award, so I'm worth it. Secondly, and I gave the certificate I gave to my child with autism nonverbal, and I meant it from the depth of my heart. I said, this is an appreciation of your tolerance and acceptance of an alien world. Believe me, how much I respect my children with autism, because it's their lot in life to live a lifetime in a very alien world. And all the time somebody trying to pull them into this alien world. How would you or I feel? So stories, yes, we do create stories for them, depending on their receptive language abilities. We notice, we observe, and we make stories. I make stories with this kiddo of mine, and he listens. And I learned storytelling from my dog. Dogs and children are very, very much the same. Dogs and special children are even more similar.
Yeah.
My Toffee, who was with me for 17 years of her life, taught me so many things about children. And I would try out a story with Toffee. If Toffee walked away, that story never went to children or to any audience. It went right back into the bag to think, what should I do with this? If Toffee came and licked my face, that story went everywhere, whether people wanted to hear it or not.
So this is a very interesting conversation going. Okay, sorry, Shivani, do you want to add something?
A quick little thing to when Champa was talking about severe and profound disabilities, and there are practical ways to open up the world of storytelling and storybooks to all kinds of levels, all children. So one example that I often tell parents and teachers is to create an adaptive book. You know, an adaptive book is a modified book where it gives the chance to the child, if you're not, to be more actively involved in the act of storytelling. So that, you have, simply put, an adaptive book will be where you create pictures, take pictures of the existing pictures in the book and help the child to match them. So gives them a chance to be actively involved in the entire routine of a storytelling. And that's a great way to open up the world of books to children who we think have difficulty and who are on the more severe to profound spectrum of the disability diagnosis. So that can be a sort of a practical tip or strategy for storytellers out there or parents in the audience. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, great. I think because parents would like to know exactly what are the strategies that they can use. And in fact, I wanted to ask this question, Champa or Nancy, whoever would like to add in. Are there any, strategies that a storyteller looking to tell stories to a diverse group, maybe keeping in mind the diverse needs of a child or children, what are the strategies that can make storytelling effective? And anything that you have used in your work that you would like to share with the audience here?
Can I answer this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, because I wanted to add on to what Champa was saying about the kids are always, making mistakes, and they're saying they are careless mistakes. And these kids have been told so many times, you're wrong, and to the point that they keep quiet because they don't want to be wrong again. So, and it ties in with your question now, because I like to use stories with repetition. And when there's repetition, like, and they went up and they went down and they went up and they went down. And after a while, and you invite the children to tell with you, and they can do with you as well. Non-verbal, they can do the action. Verbal, they can shout it out. And they are never wrong because they are following you. So it's a chance for them to experience success, repeated success. And even if they say the wrong thing, it's fine. You repeat until they say the right thing. And, it's so fun to be doing everything together, not spotlighted like, oh, there he goes again. And, they pick up on our cues, like, even if we don't say they're wrong, but they feel it. So when you're in the story and everyone is invited, there's no wrong. Everyone is enjoying it. And like what you were saying about alien world, so stories with a structure, with repetition, it's familiarity. They are familiar, they know what to do, they join in, and everyone has a good time. Yeah. So
right. I think those are things that we must take note of while we plan our stories. Yeah.
The maximum number of stories that I made up with groups of children with diverse needs is stories about myself. And they're actually stories. So because suppose I have a bunch of kids that I know are deficient in being able to identify emotions or give names to them or even understand what to do with them and all. So I need to be a model out there, and I'll walk in and I'll have a kind of a very exaggerated sad look on my face or whatever, goad them to ask that one kid maybe, a little more tuned to picking up non-verbal cues, like, so what happened to you today? And I say, I'm sad. Like Nancy rightly said, sad, hoping somebody will say why. If they don't, I goad them. Then when they say why, I said, I remember when I was 7 years old, or whatever the age group of that kid is, I made such a big mistake. And the first thing is, you made a mistake? I made mistakes all the time. Then I would just give this little 2-3 few sentences, not to be too overwhelming for my children to process, to not so much that they lose track of what I begin somewhere, and it's very easy for children to lose track. So just 2-3 sentences and what happened and how, like, look at me today. I'm like, oh, I'm a teacher and I love you. And so repeatedly with lots and lots of my children, and mind you, not only children. I have done group emotional well-being therapy sessions with young adults. And I found that one of the best ways I could reach them is when I took myself off the pedestal. When I was not quite one of them, because then they don't know whether I can be reached for help. But I also was there with them. So it's more or less like, so those stories in my classrooms or in my groups have made a lot of difference. And then a little bit of research into, like, especially I think Shivani, I'm sure, and Nancy too will agree, you have children with autism. We know they have challenges in managing sensorial inputs. So you need a little bit of research into, if possible, that, is there a child in my audience who's extra sensitive to loud noise? And I'm not going to bring the bang into my story. I'm just going to say the balloon went off with a bang. So I need to be sensitive to needs that way. And it's not, like I said, always only special needs. I have done storytelling for 3-year-olds where I have seen reputed storytellers scare away audiences, where I've seen 3-4-year-olds start crying, because here was a storyteller who was doing a fantastic job of being a true to life lion. But it's a 3-year-old. Her imagination can go from here to there in nanoseconds. So that storyteller became a real lion, and this kid just started bawling. I need to understand who I'm talking to. What is their sense of imagination? Where do I want to take them? Like I said, let the story take over, not the teller. So don't get so carried away in your histrionics and in, using things and puppets or illustrations or whatever. So just a little bit of thought. Be inclusive. You don't know. You're telling a story of how much a mother loved a child. How much a mother loved a child. You've said it 1,000 times, and there is that one little child in those 100 children whose mother has just died. No. We need to remember things. We don't know our audience. So we can look at the content of our story and see where are the places we emphasize and downplay so that it just gets carried away. And when I do storytelling of fairy tales, I stop where the ogre is going to, rip the kid apart or put the kid in boiling oil or something. And I say, this is a story. Never really happens, but the writer thought it would be interesting to write this. So don't worry, children. Champa auntie will come back. I just tell the story, and this part is not a nice part. Do you want to cover your ears? There are children actually who've done this in Hansel and Gretel and all that. So it's just for us to be a discerning adult.
Yeah.
And no children. That's what. But it's a massively fantastic pedagogical tool. As Shivani says, books can be magic. The discovery that I can sit with the book and relate to the book is such empowerment for a child. So let the children pick up books, let them turn them upside down, inside out. We insist on protocols. It kills desire.
True. And we've had this wonderful conversation about perceptions that we have about children and how we want children to, like you said, protocols and this and that, and let the child, engage with books, interact with books freely, right? Now, again, I'm coming back to the idea of books and, in the perspective of a book that gives the child a sense of being seen and heard and a sense of being with peers, right? Whoever they are, because at the end of the day, like we all agree, children are children, right? So what kind of, if a parent, a storyteller, or an educator is looking to pick some books or stories for the children, are there any specific things that they should look at, to make that whole experience very inclusive for the child? So I'm coming back to you, Shivani and Champa. If you can just, put that out for storytellers here.
Sure, that's a great question. And I think I would encourage and urge all the audience members here to really pick up storybooks that represent diversity in our world today. And disability is just one part of it, right? Diversity of all kinds. I think as adults, as stewards of our children's minds and attitudes and how they are going to become inclusive-minded adults or not, I think it's very important that you pick the right book. And by that, I don't mean censoring. I don't mean that this is a bad book or this is a good book, but take a look at a book and see, how are the characters portrayed in the book? And I'm talking specifically about children's books because that's what I'm publishing. So what I keep in mind is, are the characters with a disability? Are there children with disabilities in the storybook that you've picked? I think that's the first question. Going back to what Shwetal was saying, every child wants to be seen and heard. And I think there is a lack of that. So find a book where you will find a character who has a disability. Maybe he's on a wheelchair, maybe he's blind, maybe he's deaf, maybe he has autism. It doesn't matter what that disability, but a child with a different need and an ability. Is that child in the book? If that character exists, is that character active? Is that character capable? How is that child being portrayed in the narrative, in the illustrations, in the color? Like, again, going back to is the book pitifying the child or is the book glorifying the child? We want a book that's matter of fact, that's a simple story, enough for you to have a conversation in your classroom with the neurotypical children. And this is really my big passion, is to ensure that we have visibility for children with disabilities in our literature. Children with disabilities are in many ways invisible. You don't find, you will probably have to really go look, and I've done that job for you. If you go on our website, and I'll put the link in our chat box, we've done a curation of children's books that were published in India and the US that focus on, empathy, friendship, diverse abilities, the idea of diversity in children's books. So there is a section on our website called Your Storyboard. I'll send you a link. You can just log in. It's just login access, and you'll be able to get a sort of curated library of what these books could look like. And then again, when you are on your own in a bookstore or you're on Amazon, look at books that encourage, the narrative encourages conversation. The narrative encourages a child to say, what is Braille? That may be something that a child doesn't know. And this is one way to make them aware. What is Braille? If a child is deaf, how does he or she communicate? If a child is on a wheelchair, how does she come to school? These are the kind of, I think, conversations are important for us to shape minds. If we want to change attitudes of this generation of young children so that they can grow up to be so that we can grow up to be an inclusive society, I think you storytellers and parents have an extremely powerful role to play in that. The kinds of books you choose and the kinds of stories you tell, if they are diverse, if they represent children with diversity in a strength-based manner, in a way that a child can have a conversation, ask you a question, and think of them as another child who has a disability, but the bottom line being, disability is not less than. Disability is a disability. Difference is a difference. It doesn't mean it is less than. So that idea, that thinking, I'm talking specifically from a neurotypical child's mind or point of view, is that ensuring that those kinds of books or those kinds of stories are curated by you. I think you play a very huge role in shaping our society's attitudes and mindsets towards a much more inclusive world.
Wow, thank you, Shivani.
Sorry,
Yes.
just one more. Do I have time, or do you? I
Yes,
just want to
quickly,
share.
because
share one more example of we've been doing with Samarthya Foundation. I've been running a lot of these inclusive storytelling sessions on Zoom, of course, now because of the whole coronavirus thing. And we have these sessions where we have had, actually, Champa has been one of our storytellers, Shwetal has been one of our storytellers. We bring together storytellers to tell whatever story that may be. And we have an inclusive audience, an audience of children with all kinds of abilities. And we have had tremendous success with children who are neurotypical enjoying those stories where they see a child who's different than them, and children with disabilities being able to see themselves in those stories and have those conversations. So I think it's a very powerful tool. I think that I hope that you all will take it forward. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Shivani. I'm sure each one of us here present today has got much more than what we came looking for today, like strategies and whatnot, what to do, what works, what doesn't work. And yeah, it was so enlightening for even the co-hosts, I would say. We are special educators, but yeah, we also got so much
I think what Shivani said is very important. It's just that we need books, we need stories where there is, a set of characters that actually mirror the cosmic. Yes, so everywhere. So it's not about the character with the disability being portrayed as being larger than life or anything like that. I don't know how many of you watched this series on Netflix called The Good Doctor. Okay, so there was a lot of, so I'm just talking to people about it because I'm interested to know. I'm just quiet and I listen to people. And so there were many who said it fabulous, this, that, etc. Well, I watched too and I loved it. And I said, yes. And then I spoke to 2-3 of my young adult students with autism. And one of them said that I don't like the idea at all. So I said, can you explain? So he said, because again, it conveys the message that we need to be very, very talented to be accepted. That's not the right message. That's not what they should be showing. Should have been just one of the doctors. That's it. What they needed to have shown is a bunch of doctors. Some of them good, some of them bad, some of them doing fantastic things, and he's one of them. Why can't we be one of them? And that is a slogan I put up in my place. Why can't we all be one of us? Why do we have to be whatever, differently abled? You can come up with any name, talented, not talented, splinter gift, all this. Why can't we just be one of us? So as Shivani said, we need books. We need hundreds and hundreds of books, especially for children, because they are at the formative stage of life. What they get as their diet, the reading diet, story diet, will be such a major part of their grooming of the individual or the person that they're going to be, and how comfortable they are with the rest of the world around them. And the rest of the world around them is just going to be different. So everyone is just one of us. So we have to work towards that. We are all one of us.
It's a very, very powerful, very, very meaningful conversation we're having, I think. Yeah.
As we can see in the chat box, it's
exactly. We're getting so many comments here. And and we have many questions waiting for you. So before we sign off, I would like, to invite Rituparna, because there are many questions from the audience, and if she could, we could have them answered by you from the panel. So Rituparna, yes.
I think we can have another evening of this conversation, and we would have so much more to talk about.
Yes.
Thank you so much, all you amazing speakers. I have one question for Nancy while I was speaking to us. Do you still tell Cinderella to children, and do you still tell your fairy tales to children, or do you like Shivani said that she's writing books and she uses children's literature? Champa says she makes up her own stories. So what kind of stories do you tell children with special needs?
Well, sometimes I do ask them as well what story they would like. And then some of them say they know Cinderella or something, and because they've attended storytelling on Zoom, which is, I'm so thankful for Zoom now, actually. So some of them say, can we have those folk tales that we've never heard of? Like the Four Friends from Panchatantra and all that. They are not familiar with that, so they want those. And then some say, can we have the Grimm's fairy tales? And yeah, so I do still tell the Three Little Pigs and the usual ones. Yes, I do.
Fantastic.
Can I just add one more anecdote to what Nancy or Rituparna, what your question was, that I have been doing these Zoom sessions with children, grades 3 and 4 and 5. And of course, reading one of the books that we are publishing, one of the books we have is called Books Are Magical, where the central character, the hero of the story is Bilal, who has dyslexia. And we go through the story and we have conversation. That's the most important thing, the reflection part with children about what they thought, what their questions might be. And I've done like about sessions for about 700 children on these books. And every time, I ask, like Nancy said, what would you like to read? It's incredible how many times kids would have heard that story, will come back and say, can we talk about Bilal? Because what they want is to talk. They want to talk about this character. It's not necessarily what happened in the story, the reflection, sort of. So looking at books and storytelling as a tool, that's why I keep using that word, is to generate that conversation, because that conversation has not left them. It's much like today, we can talk about this for hours. And I think at the end of it, the storytellers will still want to come back and talk about this. I think children are the same way. When something touches them, when something is meaningful to them, that character they remember, and they want to talk about how he was maybe struggling in reading, or how his friend helped him, or how he's won the speech competition. The finer nuances of that story, which I think are really important in sort of a normalizing conversation. So children will pick those stories, and children will come back to them again and again.
I hear you. And like what you said, I'd like to ask a question, pick up something which one of our participants had sent in before the event, which is that behavior modification through stories for children with special needs. That's a very targeted messaging for children. Is that possible through stories? And if yes, without telling a story, you can just say what kind of a story will it, without being preachy, without being didactic of any kind, if you were to use to influence behavior?
I think sometimes we create social stories for children with autism to teach a specific skill, maybe, or a particular behavior that we want us to work with them on. So a social story is mainly like a visual way of telling a story. We take a story, and that story is created for the child. It could be about a particular skill. For example, one child, who always runs whenever he goes out, and the mother was having difficulty because he wouldn't walk with her in the mall. So we create a story around that mall experience, but put it in a behavioral expectation, kind of simplify it, break it down into smaller sections, and put visuals of pictures of the kind of behavior we want the child to show, and read it as a story, so that behavioral expectation, I know it's a very small example, without getting too much into detail, but sometimes that can help as well. And that's more of a visual way of creating an original story for that child based on their experience.
It's like what both Shivani and Champa, they both said, that you need to have that one story for that one child, which is speaking to that child in the vocabulary that he or she will understand, in the context that the child will understand. And that's why it's more powerful. And you have to perhaps create it. How do you strengthen emotional quotient of specially able?
Sorry. See, modification happens over a period of time. And modification, especially in a child, is so dependent on the child's adult environment. So if we use a story with the hope of helping the child to change, then we might be just doing half of what we need to do. We then also need to tell stories to modify the adults around the child. A child's behavior is a response to the environment around her. Behavior is response. So when you want to modify behavior, you first need to cater to what is triggering the behavior, right? So in that context, whether special needs or otherwise, especially when I worked for many years with children who are from terribly socio-emotionally, psychologically deprived, difficult children of sex workers, children in juvenile remand homes who are there because they have committed pretty grave and heinous crimes in the eyes of the world. What happened? How did they become like that? The contexts are important. So it's not an interrogation, because that is always a journey into the child looking for a justification. My mother did not love me. We did not have food at home. My father was an alcoholic. You will hear that over and over again. But how did you respond to that? Is your father the only alcoholic in the world? Are there not other fathers? So we create stories, like I said, or we pick up stories, or we write stories, or we pick up books where we hope that the story addresses the context of this child. It is, I go back to what I said earlier, it is about the audience being able to relate to your content, not take something away from it. It's not a learning. The learning will happen later. If you are able to create just that tiny dot where there's some relating that has happened, you have put into motion a thought process. Thought always precedes action, except for ADHD, where action precedes thought, and sometimes thought never comes. It's only one action after another action. We can use stories there also to generate thought. So stories are marvelous things. The power is superlative. But like I said, we cannot be presumptuous. We cannot tell a story and say, so what did you learn from this? Because we should be prepared for the answers. I had a child who was whatever story the storyteller said, for reasons of, it was a counseling session. And one kid says, she only wore a black dress always. That was the child's takeaway. So takeaways can be, we have to give the right to them. We have to give them that right. Takeaways can be anything. I cannot have a preconceived agenda but my commitment to my story writing or my storytelling is that I'm offering a plethora, a Pandora's box, a platform, perspectives which are not there in the child's current life.
Exactly.
What I'm listening constantly from Champa and even what Shivani is saying, that there needs to be an ability for the storyteller to not go just search for the story, but perhaps create a story which will speak to the child the way the child wants and needs at that particular time. And while there are ready-made stories waiting to be told, but sometimes if you are telling stories to a group of children with special needs, or any kind of a need for that matter, you'll have to find that one story which you may be creating. And I think that's something which we need to be completely aware of. I have some very quick, interesting questions. Somebody's asked how to stimulate the child to reciprocate verbally or non-verbally using facial expressions. And we know expressions, expressing for a child could be difficult. Is there like added expectations? Or when it comes to storytelling, do we wait for the child to respond, and what can be the response for that matter?
It depends on how critical it is for you. Why are we looking at responses? I mean, am I not going to tell a story if my children don't listen in the way that I think they should be listening to me? Am I not going to be a storyteller then? Do I want them to listen only in particular ways and only respond? Like, I guess this is a query of whether we can use expression and tone to trigger a response, verbal or non-verbal. I would say yes, definitely, because all children, all human beings need to be helped to reach the other humans on this planet. But let us not get bogged down with our perceptions of that response. Before we want to trigger a response in a child, I need to ask myself many times, why am I thinking that the child is not responding? Is it because the child is not responding in my known ways? Blinking, looking at me, clapping, smiling, just sitting there. How am I sure that the child who's just sitting and playing with the transition tool and not looking anywhere and making noises is not really listening? How can I be so sure? And do I really take the responsibility of the listener? I'm a teller. Let me remain a teller. Why do I impinge on my listeners' rights? I don't listen all the time to the world around me. I make choices. Why don't I give that choice to my audience? It's not to do with who I am, the quality of the teller I am. It is just a natural right my listener has. That day, my listener doesn't want to listen to me. It's fine. But stories tell, they reach out. Be confident. Every mother here, every teacher here, every teller here, 40 years of telling children, I cannot be wrong. They listen, just in ways which are a million ways different from the tiny repertoire of listening behavior that we have in our bank. Children listen.
Listening to you, I'm getting goosebumps. And I must tell you this very, very teeny tiny anecdote. Pretty early on in my career as a storyteller, I was invited, and thanks to Bukuru for taking me to a special needs school in Delhi. And it was my first experience. I had no understanding of what to take. So I had a story with puppets, and I went in very enthusiastically. And the teacher, the lead teacher, she said that, I must warn you, my children will not look at you. Because they'll not look into your eyes, and they will not laugh. They will not pick up their hands if you ask them to do it. But I can assure you, no matter what they do, they will only listen to you. So I said, no, it's perfectly fine. I'm used to children looking at me and looking at my eyes, and I look at them. She said, don't look for an eye contact. I said, okay, fine. And I made it a very, very strong decision not to just look at the children, not look at the children. The children were sitting with their companions, and which were teacher assistants with them, because they needed help in mobility as well. And sometimes in communicating. 90% of the children were non-verbal, and they would finger write their thoughts and feelings to their companion teachers. And I was very curious to know what are they what are they communicating to their teachers while they were listening. They would just pick up the hand and they would write something, and I could see that while my story is on. But I made a very conscious decision not to look at the eyes. And as I was telling my story, I could see heads turn. And I could see heads turn towards me, right? The children who were looking down, they were all looking from the corner of their eye. They were trying to look here. They were again looking back. Too shy. I was scared. My hands were shivering. I was holding puppets. I was shivering because I had to just tell myself, don't look at them. Just don't look at any one of them. Look in through them, look in between their heads, look at the companion teacher. You get your energy from them, but don't. And the end of the session, the teacher said, I've never seen this happen. Children were looking at you. And the good thinking, if you had made an eye contact, that child would have looked away. So, and those were happening for very brief times. And that was a big learning for me.
See, Shivani will know because she works. See, what the autistic brain, of course, the autistic brain is not one brain. It is a trillion brains. Every single person with autism in the world is a brain in itself. However, one little thing is about their sensorial input processing and how they take it, So most of the time, this looking at you, if you were to put yourself into the shoes of a child with an autistic brain, probably what is happening is when he gets a visual input from your face, he can probably count the hairs in your nostril.
Oh, yes.
That's the kind of detail some autistic people get through a visual. It is overwhelming.
Yeah, and I also think I agree with you, Champa. It's overwhelming, and there's a lot of pressure that's building up in that expectation to have that eye contact.
Can you imagine looking at me if you could see every pore in my face as a big hole? Could you stand to look at me? No. So it's not about training them to look, come on, shake hands. No. Find ways of reaching, and more than that, find ways of them reaching you and meeting you halfway. I walk a little toward your world, you walk a little toward my world. Let us be in this neutral space.
And if I can, Sorry, just add to what you said, Champa, is that yes, there is a lot of pressure that builds in within a child when you say, look at me, or you have that expectation of a direct eye contact and look, whereas like she rightly said, they may be looking away, doing something, but they're still paying attention. But at the same, having said that, for a parent who may have never done storytelling or book reading, and I'm saying this from experience with working with so many mothers who have made that assumption that their child doesn't know, will not enjoy a book reading routine, is that facial expression and that animated voice is a boost. It can help you open up that world to reach out to that child. So don't expect that response coming from them, but you can certainly use that absolutely animated way of stating a line or repetition, like Nancy said, to reach out further and further. But the response is not necessarily what we are focusing on, is how much are we able to reach out to that child given their needs and given their condition and given whatever their limitations are with their sensorial overload and whatnot. So to the audience member who asked this question, I think using all the tools that you have in your toolkit is a boost for a child with a special need to reach out to them for sure.
Fantastic.
Going back to what Shwetal was asking about content, sorry, Ritu.
Yeah.
You need to be really listening hard. Look at the shoulder stoop of your audience, look at their eyes, look at their head turns, so there's this kid who, autistic child, who has this thing about snakes. And there was a chapter in his textbook, which was about reptiles and all of that. And he was like, no. And his mama was, it's simple, it's easy words. And I said, okay, why the no? He prefers to type things out. And he said, he typed out snakes, don't like. I said, chill, we'll do the next chapter. Let's skip this. Look out, they will reach out to you. You have to build that trust in your child that he or she is being heard. Because they are not speaking your language, either verbally or non-verbally, you are making a very big mistake of not listening to his language. He has a very specific language and you can learn it. You can see and learn. You expect him to learn your language. Why can't you learn his? When he looks away, when he walks away from you, when he turns, rolls over, maybe he just has that tactile necessity at that point of time of getting a good rub on his back. Autism can be hypotactile. There could be so many things. You're in the middle of reading or telling the story. Your child is telling you things. Listen, cater. He will listen to your story and he will enjoy your story. He will bring that book back to you again and again because it's a connect. And if you can connect while in the middle of the story reading or telling to all the other needs that he or she is conveying to you, communicating to you, well, that's where you make the connect between the book, the story, you and the child. So it's
Champa spoke about understanding the language that the child understands and sort of using it. So here is a question, and perhaps it's open to all, which says, how important is it to learn sign language to tell a story? And what are the other ways to engage these children if we do not know sign language? I think, Nancy, you've worked with children and you've used sign language. Maybe you'd like to take that?
Yeah, am I muted? No. Okay, so I just want to add on to what Champa was saying, that you have to be very present. So if you have a small group, you really have to be able to see all the little nuances, that the reactions that they are returning to you. If you do something and you see a positive reaction, you might want to try doing that again. And if you shout and you notice that they are scared or something, or one child is afraid, you will not want to repeat that. And if you repeat that, then you might get a very negative reaction. So, but if the group is very, very big, then of course you cannot cater to every single one. You focus on some, and you know that the carers will take care of the others. But that could also be the way that they are reacting to your story. It's not bad behavior. They are reacting to your story. Yeah. So we got to accept them and, they are enjoying it somehow. Sorry, I forgot what's your question because I wanted to talk about that.
Talk about sign language.
Oh,
That's the sign language is important.
right. So when I told at the school for the deaf, the teacher was there accompanying. So I spoke slowly, and then she did the sign language for me. And there were some simple ones that I would learn and follow her. But no, I didn't learn sign language to tell the entire story by myself. But what the teacher encouraged the kids to do was they could learn the story with her and then sign it back to me. I typed out the story for them so they could read and sign. Yeah. And then at the school for the blind, the teacher typed it out into Braille for them so they could read the story as well. Yeah. And then other methods I used were also drawing. For the kids who were hearing impaired, I used drawing stories so they could follow the drawing, and then they wouldn't be looking at the teacher because it would be, you know, difficult. I always like to say, yeah, like you say, you know, you have a story toolkit. So if you have guests coming to your home, you will want to prepare your home with all kinds of drinks, and you will have sugar and milk and everything, and you will want to cater to every single person what they want to drink, and you would find out what they want. And if the same person is coming back again, you will make sure that you prepare the same drink for them the next time. And so with storytelling as well, you know what works with a particular person, you will try to do more of that and avoid, you know, other things that trigger negative responses. Yeah. So, but you have to be very present. Yeah. Pick up from them what they are telling you, not verbally, but just from their actions. Yeah.
See, in the context of our country, you know, that how many of our children with hearing or visual impairment actually know sign language? So that doesn't mean that the others don't get to hear stories. How many of them who have hearing impairment actually are in schools where sign language is taught? But they pictures, gestures, expressions are fantastic. I don't have a clue about sign language, but I've done tons of storytelling for the hearing impaired and the visual impaired. So, I mean, with visual impaired groups and all, like totally, you know, totally visual impaired, to partially visual impaired, we've gone for movies and all also, where the dialogues have been enough. So we don't presume things. That's what I'm saying. It's a fantastic learning. I did this project with somebody in the Man's Hospital and all that. We created these things, and in one of our sessions, we had this movie going. It was for the visually impaired. So the institution came back and said, our children are blind. I said, doesn't matter. There are dialogues in a movie. Come on, let's go for a movie. It was about going for a movie to the theater. Why do we presume a movie has to be watched? How many movies do we really watch when we go to a theater? I come back and I've forgotten 80% of whatever I might have seen or not seen. So there are the reach, the connect. A story always connects if you let it. If you don't hijack it, if you don't take it over, a story will connect to the audience. Let it do its magic. Let it do its work. So yes, sign language, if you know it, if you have, like Nancy said, make use of teachers, even children. You know, I did this impromptu storytelling for a bunch of Afghani refugees in Delhi. And I was just there, not prepared or anything. Said, Swati took me and said, Champadi, tell a story. So I stood there and made up a story about this. And there was one of their children was translating. Okay, so I said, we talked about this little plant was there, and then there was a huge storm and it got uprooted and it got flung into the ocean and it floated away, and then it got, you know, beached, and then it rooted. And then when it opened its eyes, it was devastated because it knew nothing of where it was. And then there was a tree near it and said, I know how you feel, even I came here, but that was 10 years ago, and I'm like, quite okay now. And so anyway, I continued, made it up. They were listening. And when this new plant was crying and saying, I can't live here. I can't live here. I need to go back to my land. I need to go back to my land. So this other plant said that, look up, what do you see above you? So that's the sky. Yeah, it's the same one above your land too. And, so do you feel the breeze rustling your leaves? Yes, I do. It's the same breeze. It goes all over the world. Do you see the water? It's the same. Do you see the land? It's the same. So yes, there are things that are different. But if you have the sky and the sun and the moon and the stars and the breeze and the water, you're in the same place. You just need to remember that. And there's a little girl, a 4-year-old girl in that bunch of Afghani refugees who suddenly stood up and said something. And the translator, she was a 13-year-old girl, she turned to me. She had tears in her eyes. She gave me a hug. And she said, Auntie, my little sister is saying, Auntie is telling our story. It reaches, it reaches. You tell, it will reach. You plan it to reach, it will not reach because you will be making mistakes. Stories have magic. They will reach.
Lots of interesting takeaways. And like I said, we are going over, and I was committed to keep it like a 90-minute chat. So thank you so much, Nancy, Shivani, Champa. I think my heart is full tonight, listening to each one of you open your hearts and share your stories with so much of generosity. And I can say this on behalf of all my tribe of storytellers who are here listening to you. We have learned so much, and we are eager to learn more. And maybe we'll invite you to come and teach us a little bit more than what we already know. We think we know about storytelling, and there's a lot more that we need to explore together. So over to you, Charlie and Shwetal, to say your thank yous and wrap up this evening.
Yes, thank you, Rituparna, first of all, for giving us this opportunity to connect on such an important subject, and to really understand where we are coming from, and to sort of, break those shackles of our presumptions and our knowings, and to be present. I think we have found a treasure of insights today, and this is something that we all will carry, I agree. And this is something I think we have just sort of touched upon something. There's so much more to be uncovered on this trail. So yes, we look forward to more such interactions with you. And I really, really want to thank Nancy, Champa, and Shivani for sharing these stories with us, because ultimately these now become a part of our stories. And from here, these are the stories that will go out in the world. And I hope that the power of stories will help children of all abilities, special, unspecial, whatever word we want to use, reclaim their story. I think it's about their story ultimately, right? So having said that, I really want to thank you again. And I know that, our audience has been, putting it in the chat box, their experiences, they've really enjoyed it. But if they want to add what are their takeaways today, I think we really look forward to see that as well. And this is a wrap from here. And Charlie, your last thoughts?
Oh yeah, yes. Please, audience, you can take the last 5 minutes maybe to put in the chat box your takeaways, maybe one line, one word, anything that you want to share. And yeah, I would say that each one of us, even if we are not professional storytellers, we can conclude from today's conversation that, even in our resource rooms, even before we meet the child, the actual child we are going to teach, we exchange stories, don't we? The moment someone utters that, this is the label of the child that I'm handing over to you, this is the diagnosis of the child, what is it, we are handing over a story about that child already to someone. So now that we know that with our with our red pens, that the crosses and the circles that we make, that also has a story, right? That changes the whole narrative of the child. So now that we know that each one of us is already a storyteller, and from today's conversation, I think we can take this forward. And our main takeaway would be, at least my main takeaway would be that let's be more mindful now of the stories that we are telling every single day, right?
Can I just say thank you to Rituparna. So really heartfelt thank you. It's such an honor to be on this platform and watching all these comments and all the wonderful audience members, your tribe of storytellers. More power to you. Keep creating such platforms for us to talk about such important topics. And thank you again so much. This has been such an amazing experience. Keep up the good work, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, each one of you, especially Nancy, you've joined us from Singapore. I don't know how late it is for you to, be there. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's a quarter to midnight now. Yeah, I think you can see I'm slowly. Yeah,
Good
I do want to thank Champa and Shivani for sharing as well. I always feel that I learn, I don't know it all. I learn when I hear you talking and when you are sharing. And we are all here because we love the children and we love what we do. And we want them to belong, right? We all want to belong. So thank you so much. I will have sweet dreams tonight.
Thank you, everyone. It was superb to be with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And the Storied Way continues. Remember, we have the traveler and his very willing and eager apprentice carrying on this journey of exploration of the Storied Way, finding that many intersections. Tomorrow night, we are going to be talking about storytelling as a career. That's the second other topic, which a lot of people have written to us about, that we want to talk about. Storytelling, does it pay? Can you really earn a living out of it? So tomorrow night, we're going to have some fantastic panelists coming and sharing their stories and answering some straight questions. So join in tomorrow at 7:30. And if you like the Storied Way, please go ahead and share about it on social media. Tell people what you're taking back. Connect people to Shivani, to Champa, to Nancy. Go and find them, because I'm sure they're such willing givers of their knowledge. They would be happy to work with you and help you find the right stories to tell. Thank you so much, everyone, and good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu.
This was 9:18, almost 9:20. This could have gone on.